Pleased to have this wonderful audience here in the theater, and we also have at least as many at home in their jammies on Zoom. Yes. So now, for those of you in the theater, I think those of you who've been here before know what I'm going to say now, and you really have to do this. It's time to silence all of those things that chirp and whistle and say all those. And then for those of you at home, you can submit your questions using the Q&A module in Zoom, and you can do that at any time. And then at the end, we will have questions both from here in the theater and from Zoom. If you have a question, and I'm sure they will be brilliant, if you have a question, please wait until the microphone comes around so that our colleagues on Zoom can hear your brilliant question. So now I really would like to take a moment to acknowledge those who have made the additional commitment to support Hillwood as members of our Legacy Council. That is a very, very thoughtful way to help us plan to ensure a vibrant future for Hillwood, so thank you. Our new exhibition, On Time, Giving Form to the Fleeting, is now open. If you haven't seen it yet, I hope you'll come back and travel through time with these fabulous decorative arts that were created to measure it. The exhibition series begins on March 11th. Please be sure to visit Hillwood's website. We have 3 sensational lectures that are associated with that exhibition, so please don't miss any of them. This is now the 3rd in our 4-part Great Homes and Gardens lecture series. It continues this evening with Douglas Hamilton Jr. and Norman Barker. Next week concludes this. It's always so sad, you know, when we're Great Homes and Gardens. Ooh. Next week, we conclude with our local interior designer, Lorna Gross, who is exploring how our homes and hosting experiences reflect the life we want to live. So you'll have a big insight on Doug and Soni's life and how they want to live, because you're going to see the inside of their house. There are limited virtual and in-person tickets still available for the final lecture, so that if you haven't already registered, be sure to do that very soon. Now, tonight, we have a whole new format. We're excited to hear from Doug and Norm, who will explore the fabulous Baltimore County estate called Tashiding, and then we will have a book signing afterwards. The book is absolutely gorgeous. And that book signing, as you know, will take place right outside the doors here after the lecture. You may have seen books are available for purchase upstairs in the museum shop. It is such a beautiful book. I am very proud and pleased to have been asked to write the foreword for the publication. So, of course, you'll want to get the book, right? Now, just before I hand over the mic, I wanted to share a bit about Doug and Norm. A self-taught gardener, Douglas Hamilton Jr., credits his lifelong curiosity about the natural world, horticulture, travel, and Asian aesthetics as inspirations for the gardens that he and his wife, Soni, developed at Tashiding. A former board chair and president of Baltimore's renowned Walters Art Museum, which of course is where I got to know him. It is a great museum. Don't you dare say it's your favorite, though.
She did say after.
Not here. Oh, okay. After Hillwood. Mine too, after Hillwood. Yeah. Doug served on the board of the Bhutan Foundation. Do you have pictures of the archery?
We do.
Good, okay. Sorry, spoiler alert, that archers are coming. As well as those of McDonough School and the Valley's Planning Council. Norman Barker is professor emeritus of this is such a wild thing. Wait until you hear. Professor Emeritus of Pathology and Art as applied to medicine at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. He's an award-winning science photographer, writer, and designer. His work appears in textbooks, journals, and museums worldwide. His photographs are in the permanent collections of more than 40 museums, including the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, the George Eastman Museum, the American Museum of Natural History, and the Science Museum in London. Yeah, he's a guy. Yeah. He's an accredited senior imaging scientist and a fellow of the Royal Photographic Society in Great Britain and the Biocommunications Association. I don't know, maybe some of you know him from there. Now, please join me in welcoming Doug and Norm to the podium.
Thank you, sir. Good evening. I'm Douglas. This is Norm. Let's see here. Okay, first of all, Kate, I'd like to thank you very much for the invitation this evening to speak to this august group, and also to thank you again so much for writing your wonderful foreword to our book. We're here to talk about our gardens at Tashiding. Our home is located in northern Baltimore County, but I thought we'd start tonight with a slight diversion, because you've heard of 6 degrees of separation. I have 1 degree of separation with Hillwood, and it's an upstairs-downstairs association. And we're going to have first a little pop quiz. And so the first person that can answer the question, we have a small prize for you. And so if you'll pay attention to the screen, who could identify the 2 small children in this photograph? Anybody?
1 degree of separation.
Okay. Well, these are the same 2 girls a few years later. Guess nobody's going to get it. Okay. Well, the girl on the left, on the right in the first photograph, and on the left in the second photograph is Ellen Charles. Wow. And that's her sister Melissa. And the woman in the middle was my grandmother, Harriet Roscoe Rogers, a Scottish grandmother, who was their nanny for many years. And so that's my downstairs connection with Hillwood. Now we'll move on, and there's Ellen and me when I was president of the Walters Board, and Ellen came to Tashiding. We had a lovely lunch and reminisced about my Scottish grandmother. Now the upstairs connection, does anybody recognize that location? That is the Pavillon d'Artois, which is the French chateau owned by Eleanor Post Close Barzan, Marjorie Meriwether Post's second daughter. The second photograph is Chateau Lefay, which my artist Aunt Elaine owned for many years nearby the Pavillon d'Artois, and they were very good friends and would typically have Sunday dinner together. And at one occasion, I was invited to join them for dinner, and I can tell you that Eleanor knew how to entertain very lavishly, much like I think her mother, and that was great fun. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. We call our property Tashiding, which is loosely translated, it means the center of all auspicious places. My wife Sonia is from the Kingdom of Sikkim, and so that's a lot of where the Asian influence comes from. We created our gardens ourselves with no master plan. We had no landscape architects. Sonia and I did all the design ourselves. We have 1 full-time gardener and a couple of part-time people that help us with it. The garden was created over 25 years, 1 step at a time. That's a view of the house through the garden. And if there's a observation about the garden, art is and I can't quite read it from the screen, Norm, art is the imposing of a pattern on experience, and our aesthetic enjoyment is recognition of the pattern. Norm began to photograph our gardens 4 years ago. And about 2 years into that, we decided there must be a book in there somewhere because the photographs were fantastic. And so I was forced to sort of think about why does the garden look the way it does. And so the book talks about that. So there's a lot of family background, family history, if you will. The genesis of the garden began on a hot and humid day in New Delhi, India in 1972. I was fresh out of college, I had very little money, had a backpack, and I intended to go up to the Himalayas and trek and stay in a Buddhist monastery. I arrived in New Delhi, India early one morning. I knew one of my wife's cousins quite well, and I knew she would put me up for a few days in New Delhi. As it turned out, she was not at the residence that I went to, but this young lady was. And we had a romance that was mostly through the mail for a couple of years. And she likes to say that she was supposed to look after me for a few days in New Delhi, where she was attending college. She got stuck with a job. Sikkim is the middle of the three Himalayan historical kingdoms. Nepal is just to the west, and Bhutan to the east, Tibet to the north, India to the south. Unfortunately, Sikkim was taken over by India in the 1970s and became part of India. In the mid-19th century, Sikkim became well known to Western gardeners through the work of Joseph Hooker, who was a botanist and later the director of Kew Gardens, as his father had been before him. He published two of the most attractive garden books of the mid-19th century, The Rhododendron of Sikkim and Himalayan Plants, and these are illustrations from that. Sikkim is about the size of Delaware. It ranges in elevation from 800 feet in the south to over 28,000 feet at the peak of Mount Kanchenjunga, which is the world's third highest mountain. In Sikkim, you go through a tropical zone in the south, through the temperate zone, the alpine and glacial, any time of the year. So it's quite fantastic. There are over 40 varieties of rhododendron that are native to Sikkim, and there are over 500 species of orchids that are available in Sikkim. So anybody that is raised in Sikkim has a sort of a natural affinity for the natural world. And Sonia and I have taken full advantage of that over the years. This is Sonia hiking through a rhododendron forest. And this is the two of us on our honeymoon at about 18,000 feet. So my wife is rather adventuresome, obviously, as I think I am as well. This is one of our camps, again, on our honeymoon, again at altitude. So it's really quite a fabulous and very special place. I like this quotation because from Henry David Thoreau, because it suggests that we can create our own environment wherever we are. And I think that's one thing that gardeners really tend to do, is they pick up ideas from other places, other cultures, and they make it their own, and we've certainly endeavored to do that. We bought in 1998 this wonderful structure. As you can see, it was in great shape. It didn't go. Okay, excuse me, I'm one behind. This was a Quaker stone farmhouse built in the early part of the 19th century, and it was, as you can see, falling down. Part of the house was built on grade with no foundation. It had sunk a foot into the ground on one corner. We essentially saved the walls of the house. The property was pretty much derelict. There wasn't a whole lot there. You can see that's the view from the driveway. This is the house circa 1930, covered in ivy. This is again the photograph of the house. And this is it during reconstruction. We essentially saved the walls. We had to underpin the walls. And we had to do compact grouting, which is drilling down until you hit bedrock and planting columns of concrete down as deep as 50 feet to stabilize the walls. So we now have a modern house with the historical house being part of the house. So it gives you a sense of how it looks today from the lake. Next in complexity to the house involved the reconstruction of an expansion of the lake and the reimagining of the lake, which was silted in places it was only 6 inches deep because of the silt that had been there. We had to dredge it. We lined it with landscape fabric. About half the lake was lined with a heavy landscape fabric, 1,000 tons of river rock. We created rocky beaches, and we built what looks to be a floating tea house on the lake. With the material that we excavated out of the, from the lake, we built berms around the lake. The serpentine wall is evidence of that. And we have a collection on our property of Japanese granite lanterns and pagodas. We have about 35 of them. We've collected them over the years, and we've dispersed them throughout the property. It gives our property a bit of a spiritual feel, which makes my wife feel a little bit at home. Although Japan is not her culture, we collect Japanese decorative art. And this is the lake today as photographed by my colleague Norm Barker.
Well, I hope you bear with us this evening because we're sort of tag teaming this talk instead of one get up and one get down. So it's a collaboration. And this whole process of photographing the garden and how I met Doug is certainly serendipity, but it's been a collaboration the whole time. With having the pleasure of walking through the garden with him and getting his insights, which certainly influenced the way I photograph the garden and appreciate the garden. So just real quick, I got to tell you this story, and it's a short one. So as we take you through the tour of the garden, and then we're going to walk you into each individual part of the garden, I want to show you a video. A good friend of ours and colleague by the name of Jerome Foster, who passed away, and Doug said to me, now I really didn't know Doug. I'd met him a couple of times over the years because of his connection with the Walters Museum. But I know he was a good friend of Jerome, I was a good friend of Jerome, and he called me or sent me an email and said, hi, this is Douglas Hamilton. Would you like to come out? We're having a little bit of a wake for our friend and colleague. And I said, sure. Where's your address? Where do you live? So he put all that in there. So I go on Google to figure out where this place is, and I'm looking at Google down, and I'm seeing this, and I'm thinking, what is this place? So here we take a quick tour of the garden here, but as you turn off this road and go up the driveway, this is what you will see. Not from the air, but as we're driving up the driveway, my wife and I, we're looking and we see prayer flags, we see Chinese warriors out in the field, we see these prayer flags, and all of a sudden we see a lake. And this was on a December afternoon, and we're wondering, what the hell is going on here? Yeah. As we go up and we go past giraffes that are life-sized, and then we come up to this beautiful sycamore tree that's right in front of the main house. And of course, we didn't even get back to here yet, where there's an actual aviary with peacocks. Just a beautiful area, and a beautiful part of the garden is the woods, which we'll take you to take a look and tour through. So here's what the front part of the garden looks like. This is about 35 acres, yes. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And it contains, I'm not going to read this because you can read it, but we're going to take you through a tour for the tea house. Of course, you can see the lake. We're going to talk a little bit about the archery festival that's annually held there. And as we go on, this kind of gives you an idea of close-up some of the places. I love the children's playhouse, and we'll get to that in a second.
Grandchildren's playhouse.
Grandchildren's. And I'll point it out, that's number 7 right here. It's just an amazing place. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. There we go. Isn't that an amazing tea house? And talk about a meditative place to sit, whether inside or outside on these extremely comfortable chairs, and just watch the world go by. This was taken 2 years ago when we had one of these ideal snows. And as soon, Doug called me the night before and said, are you going to be out tomorrow? Yeah, I'll be there. So I get out of my car, and it's still dark outside. And as soon as I stepped out, it was just magical. It was one of those snows where there's a deafening silence. It's so quiet that you can actually hear your heartbeat. And on the East Coast, we never get that. You have to be out west or something to get that. Well, that was this morning, and I knew it would be special. This is one of the photographs, special photographs that we used in the book, a kind of a panorama which folds out because it just wouldn't do on the page this size. In the book, it's 48 inches as it folds out looking across the lake. Different seasons, and talk about a place to meditate. And as a photographer, I'm working hard, and I don't know if you can see it in this bottom photograph, and I'll show you a little closer, but you can see these white prayer flags. They're reflected from across the lake. Well, as I'm sitting there making this photograph, I'm thinking, how can I get rid of that reflection? And I show it to Doug, and he says, "Oh, no, I love that. That's fantastic." And they also have a goldfish training program, or I should say a koi training program, that when you come walking out on this boardwalk to get to the tea house, all of a sudden you're greeted by a bunch of hungry fish, and you can be guaranteed to see them. But this is what I'm talking about with those prayer flags. And they say, "Oh, don't get rid of that. I love it." But what a peaceful, meditative place. And just a real quick tour of the conifer and maple garden. And I think you can see why this picture made the front cover. It's just an amazing small little garden as it fits into the whole gestalt of things. We're overlooking is that in the distance there, that's the archery field. But just to give you an idea, and it's hard to tell from this perspective, but that lantern there is 8 feet. Correct?
It's 11 feet, actually.
Whoops, sorry. And the stone over here, and he's going to probably correct me on this one, they had to get a crane to make that rock garden and put that stone in. 12 tons?
They're 12 tons approximately.
My God.
That's why my posture's not good.
This was just a couple of weeks ago. And it's interesting how this garden constantly changes, as all gardens do. And that's the exciting thing about being a gardener. What's that old expression, if you first don't succeed, try again? And that certainly applies if you're a hardcore gardener. But the amazing thing about it is the different layers and textures that are in this garden, to me, is just absolutely mind-blowing.
You must have found this refreshing after photographing cancer cells all day.
But being a scientist and always looking at things in close-up, this garden is just amazing. Take a look at these things. I was fascinated by these little pine cones, which this tree is covered with these bright little pine cones. Doug?
Thank you, Norm. This is the house after it was completed. And what you see here is the historical portion of the house, which is about 2,000 square feet. We realigned the driveway so you approach and actually see the historical Quaker stone farmhouse, which we really loved. But the house is actually about 8,000 square feet, so you really don't see most of the house as you approach it. We have a lot of recycled materials. We bought 10,000 cobblestones that were taken from Baltimore City streets, hundreds of yards of old granite curbing, which we've used in steps and the like. We brought in hundreds and hundreds of tons of dry stack stone walls from western Baltimore County, which we've repurposed in stone walls at Tashiding. It's been a labor of love throughout. I'll turn it back to you, Norm, for the next image.
Great. So on our walks through the garden, Doug said to me, "Boy, I'd like to get a photograph of the house in twilight." I thought, okay, that could be interesting. So what I did, took a little bit of planning, but I got to tell you, it's not often that you get to a house that has a 20-foot arbor ladder. I brought my little ladder because the photographer Robert Capa said, and you might recognize that name, he was the photographer who photographed, he was a journalist and everything. He was killed in the Second World War, but he photographed some of the very few photographs of the landing of D-Day. But he used to say, if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. Well, I would say for garden photography, if your pictures are no good if you're not high enough. And that's a point of view to really think about, because I often try when I'm out, I try to make sure I get an elevated view. In this, we did an elevated view, hopefully to get closer to the house so there wouldn't be any architectural funny perspective and everything, so it worked out quite well. But a shot like this takes a lot of preparation. And here I am. You can see what we're trying to get. That's the frame. But you'll notice over on the left-hand side, you'll see electronic strobes all along there, because you have to illuminate the house to be able to show the house at night, right? So this is what we came up with, to have that nice warm feeling of the tungsten light as it comes through on a summer evening. And I can definitely tell you it was a summer evening. That's when that 95 degree, running those lines and everything. And people ask me, well, how many shots did it take to get that? And really about 2 or 3, because you don't have much time. Everything's planned out. You've done your test. You know what the front of the house looks like when it's illuminated. And my colleague over here has a flashlight, which he was an assistant on this picture, just filling in different areas there.
What's the exposure on that for those the photographers among us?
That was about 20 seconds. About 20 seconds. And the flashes are just popping a couple of times so that we get enough power to just illuminate it so it looks natural. All yours.
Thank you, Norm. The architect on our house was Jimmy Greaves, who took this old Quaker stone farmhouse and tried to reimagine it around our aesthetic, which was open with lots of air. And of course, a Quaker stone farmhouse is dark and dank, and this one was particularly dark and dank. So imagine saving the walls and then building a new house inside of it and around it. So the new structure looks like a pavilion, as you can clearly see. These are the hand-drawn drawings that Jim Greaves did. For those of you who have visited the Brandywine Museum in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, Jim was the architect for that. It's a wonderful museum of American art and illustration that was built inside of an old barn. One of the defining characteristics of our garden, of course, and I'll go quickly, that's the house from below. And these are Himalayan Buddhist prayer flags. And in order to make my wife feel at home, she immediately wanted prayer flags up. And these are replaced every year. And as the wind blows, they disperse the prayers across the countryside for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so this is a very important feature of the property. One of the criteria that was critical to us when we had the house designed was that we have a courtyard with a rock garden that Sonia and I would design together. And so on the top left, you see, looking from part of the courtyard into the house, you can see the rear wall of what was the historical house. On the right, you have a couple of interior shots of the house. Bottom left here is the path on the way to the swimming pool with 2 dragon fish, which are from Japanese mythology. They believe that when it represents perseverance. When a fish spawns up a stream, the fish that goes the furthest, they believe as a reward for its perseverance, turns in from a fish into a dragon. And these 2 are the moment of metamorphosis as that is taking place. The photograph on the bottom right shows a swale in front of the house. Controlling water on a hillside is always a very important thing to do. This is the entryway to the house. Again, the stone wall of the house on the right. So you see the interiors. You can see our aesthetic is not quite like Marjorie Merriweather Post. We're very interested in Japanese aesthetics. We collect Japanese painting and lacquer and ceramics is our primary area of interest, though you'll see some Tibetan Himalayan works of art in different places as well. I did not shoot the tiger. I inherited that from my artist aunt who bought it in New Delhi, India in the 1960s. Another view of the entryway. There's a Baltimore artist by the name of Grace Turnbull, who was quite well known in Baltimore. She was both a painter and a sculptor. And oddly enough, one of the works she created was of a Tibetan woman. And Sikkimese, where my wife was from, are very similar to Tibetans. My wife was actually partly Tibetan. And so that's a Tibetan figure that is in the house. The living room is a mix of Chinese Art Deco chairs, period Ming furniture, George Nakashima furniture, and a variety of other works of decorative art. Again, a little different than Hillwood. Again, a George Nakashima table chairs. This is the dining room. I assume some of you are familiar with George Nakashima? Yes. A craftsman from New Hope, Pennsylvania. There are 2 dedicated art galleries in the house. This is our gallery where we display Japanese lacquer, which you cannot see because they're in the cabinets. We have quite a collection of screens. We can only show one at a time, unfortunately, but that's the upstairs gallery. This is a downstairs gallery. The particular exhibition that's there in this photograph is American illustration from the first part of the 20th century, how Western artists see Asian women. And so there are works by both men and women showing what this was the Art Deco period, and it was a subject of great interest to people. This is an upstairs gallery hall, and the bottom left is part of my wife's shrine. Her meditation room is the highest point in the house, part of the new construction. Back to the courtyard garden. This is again looking from the garden into the house. And this is looking at the courtyard garden from within the house. Japanese lanterns were originally used to illuminate the paths going to monasteries. And beginning in the 16th century, Japanese tea masters began to use them as decorative objects in gardens. And so that's how we've used them. This is the garden in the autumn. We collected these rocks for years and years, placed them all very carefully with a crane. And these are Kingsville boxwood. Some are 80 and 100 years old, and now we're fighting boxwood blight. There's always something. Those of you who are gardeners, you're always fighting deer. There's now a beech disease that's killing beech trees. We lost all the ash trees in our forest. We have about 60 acres of forest. We lost every single ash tree. It's enough to break your heart.
And here we are at the pool and terrace. And you can see this place was obviously built for entertaining. A very comfortable space with the terrace here. Crab feast in the summertime are precious. But it's an infinity pool as well. And when you're sitting out, there's a little ledge there you can perch over, and you can look down into the lake, into the peony garden. It's just quite a beautiful view. And I haven't shown you the peony garden yet. We'll get there. But an interesting thing, as you go up from the pool and terrace, this is what you get. And on another one of our walks, Doug said to me, "Hey, I just bought some of these lanterns, and they reminded me of a temple I was in Japan. And what I'm talking about is all these that have this little glow." And of course, he said they flicker at night. They're on, what are they?
They're solar
Solar.
lights.
And they're actually beautiful, but I'm trying to think, how can we capture this so that they look like they're glowing and moving? We're not shooting video here. So again, I thought, well, let's get up on that ladder. And here we are. And I got to tell you, talk about collaboration. I'll share some HIPAA information with you, which I shouldn't. But my assistant here, who had just had a knee replacement, I'm up on the 20-foot ladder yelling to Doug. This is probably, it's in the evening, just around twilight. And I've got Doug with 2 electronic flashes in his hands, holding them straight up. And thanks to him, we have illumination on the house there. Otherwise, that would have just been a black hole. So this is another one, probably about a 40-second exposure. And I'm just screaming, "Hit it, Doug! Hit it, Doug! Hit it, Doug!" So without you, we couldn't have made this photograph.
I'm useful for something.
But it was a real collaboration. But as you walk up there, each one of these places, we're going to take a walk up those steps to see the aviary. And this beautiful, would you call that French, or it really reminds me of a British?
Well, it was actually made in China, but it mimics a pavilion you might have seen in the UK. But being Chinese, it rusted out. And so this past year, we had to replace it with a post and beam structure. But it was lovely for about 12 years. We have peacocks and Lady Amherst pheasants and red golden pheasants in there.
But I was talking about layers in the garden, and as you can see, there's just these layers. Even as you walk up from the pool, these small little touches are just incredible. And he talked about recycled material. There's the curbs he's talking about, which really work well here. And it's kind of eerie as you're walking around the property sometime in the evenings or early morning and you hear these peacocks yelling. It's kind of unsettling if you're not used to it, which I wasn't at first.
When Sonia and I were courting in New Delhi, India, we'd often go for long walks at night in Lodi Gardens in Delhi, and there were a lot of wild peacocks there. And so I wanted something, a night sound that reminisced from our early courtship.
And how many peacocks are in there?
3.
3?
All males. If you put a female in, the men will fight to the death. So we have a band of brothers.
And there's what it looked like a couple of months back. This is what it looks like now. And do you want to say something about how that matches the house and working with Jim Reeves?
Well, it does. This was Jim's last, Jim died unfortunately about a year and a half ago. This was his last job. He was a really preeminent architect in Baltimore, and his last job was to design a birdhouse, which he did with the same gusto that he did with every other project. He was a wonderful man.
And it just fits in with the house so much better. And it's actually bigger. It gives the birds a little bit more room to roam around, and it's a lot better designed than that other structure. And as you walk around the garden, there's whimsy everywhere. Douglas told me this was his COVID project, to build a playhouse for the grandchildren. But there's this whimsy and sense of humor and this beauty that you get when you walk the garden. It's just kind of, I can't say it's everywhere because it's very thought out and very tastefully done.
People often say that our garden is part park, part arboretum, and part Xanadu. So Norm's taking you through some of the Xanadu.
These are just some quacking ducks by the pool, how apropos. These were the giraffes these are life-size giraffes, correct?
Almost, they're
Almost?
about 80%. I mean, they're like young giraffes.
But as you walk around, you just see all this. This picture wound up in the book. It was not easy herding all these kids together because they wanted to show off and stick tongues out and do all that kind of stuff that kids do, but we finally got a picture of everybody just enjoying themselves. And I must tell you, if you're past a certain age, I would not recommend going down this slide. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I figured after a couple of beers I'd give it a try because I always looked at it. And it's, what, 2 stories? You go straight down and then all of a sudden, wham! The kids love it. Me, not so much. But isn't that beautiful? It's got its own swinging rope walk. But as you go into the interior, this is a playhouse. And as we're walking along, Douglas told me one time, he says, you know, you have to give children time away from adults and a place to play so they can think and be creative. And just what a wonderful spot. And it looks over the whole house. You can see the lake all the way through. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Doug?
Okay, this is the next element of the garden that we call the peony pavilion. I had wonderful parents, and I was very close to my mother, who was a kindred spirit, and I wanted a place on the property where I could sit and quietly reminisce about her and her life and everything she contributed to me, where I could plant many of her favorite flowers. So we developed a structure that we call the peony pavilion, which has tree peonies, roses, hellebores, and a rock garden as well. Roses in bloom. This is you can hardly see the pavilion here because you're looking from above and beyond it to the lake. And Norm can't resist taking photographs close up of absolutely gorgeous flowers. Some of these are in the peony pavilion. That's actually magnolia, which is nearby. Aren't they gorgeous? This is a view of the Peony Pavilion looking up toward the house. The location of the pavilion, while you're sitting in the pavilion, you can look down and see the lake, you can look up and see the house, and you can hear the stream, which is about 100 feet away. It's a beautiful stream. And on a hot day with a glass of wine and some fresh fruit, looking to the rock garden. My mother's way of paying someone a very high compliment was to say they're a peach. And wouldn't you know, we found a Japanese lantern with a peach on it. And so it has pride of place at the Peony Pavilion. Now, this gives you some sense of how we create the garden. First, you have to collect the rocks, and some of these are rather heavy, not 12 tons like some of the others, but many of these are quite heavy, 500, 600 pounds. And I placed the rocks. Every rock is where I put it. Then you begin to work in the plant material. And eventually it begins to take shape. And here it is from a slightly different angle. Tree peonies. They're very fragile flowers. They remind us of the impermanence of life, a sort of a Buddhist theme. They're very popular in both Japanese and Chinese art because they're beautiful, very showy flowers, but they don't last too long. Norm, I think
I'll take
you're up for that one.
And if you're sitting out on the Peony Pavilion, you can look down and see the stone bridge and shrine as you walk across this beautiful small stream. With its, how, that bell. How much does that thing weigh? You told me that.
It's about 40, 50 pounds.
And it makes the most magnificent sound where there's a little hammer there you can tap. But as you go across, this is a very early spring picture. And just to kind of give you a little where you are, looking back up at the house, and like you mentioned, about 100 feet from the Peony Pavilion.
It's a 21-foot long stone that was a municipal step in a building in Baltimore. And we flipped it over so the rough side is up. So it's quite rustic. It's about 18 inches, 2 feet wide, and 21 feet long. So you have to sort of balance as you walk along it. And we have a troll that lives under the bridge. So children have to behave themselves.
And some you can see, this is as you get across the bridge and you'll see monks meditating in prayers, some warriors and lanterns to show you the way. And the really interesting part about this garden is, Doug jokingly said as we're walking through one time, he says, I have Barclay Tree Service on speed dial on my phone because if you have a forest this large, you're constantly grooming. Trees are falling down. But I thought this was very environmentally conscious, where when he cuts trees, he cuts partially down, gets everything, clears it out, but leaves part of the trunk there for other birds, insects, and just very ecologically conscious.
It's called a slag when you leave the trunk standing.
And this is very early in the spring with, of course, with all the daffodils. But you might notice, you can see all the azaleas along there, along the stonework, along with rhododendron and all different plants. And just in the spring, it explodes. And it's right around the corner. It's coming.
This is a Japanese Shinto shrine that we converted for Buddhist use Those of you familiar with the Himalayas and Tibetan Buddhism, that is the faith that's practiced by my wife. And of course, I wanted to feel at home in the United States. And so I've spent 52 years now endeavoring to do that. Sonia, I guess you feel at home now? Our total property is about 100 acres, and the formal gardens are about 35. I say formal gardens, that includes the field. This is part of the transition where we go from the open area into a more intimate space. So this is a Japanese gate along the stream. Again, different seasons. Again, this is the path that goes down among boulders covered in moss, looking back toward the lawns which disappear. Our property is on the bottomland and southern slope of a ridge that defines the Western Run Valley with the Belfast Valley to the north. And our property is the ridge, and we go down both flanks. So this is the southern flank of that ridge. Again, Norm really captures the season so beautifully. The change of color, the way it all works together is very simple. In this case, we've done as little as we had to do to enable us to get down to this valley, which was choked with invasive multiflora sticker bushes. If you're familiar with multiflora rose, I think I am the world champion at chopping out multiflora rose. I spent 20 years in every winter with heavy briar pants on, chopping it out with a mattock. Those of you who are gardeners know what a mattock is, I'm sure. We've repurposed old millstones as part of the path. It's very rustic. Another section of the garden, we call it the Hillside Sanctuary. This is sort of the entryway to it. Sonia begins her day with a 4 or 5 mile walk, and she's doing her prayers and meditation while she walks every day. And as she nears the end, she walks through the valley here with these little granite statues of monks in prayer, which if she's gotten lost away with the flowers and the foliage, it brings her back to where she's supposed to be. We have steps that go up to the top of the ridge, 120 granite steps. It took a crew of 5, 3 weeks under my direction, to create these steps. Each step, the smaller steps, weigh about 300 pounds apiece. We slid them up on boards with ropes, and from the top we slid them down on boards with ropes. And you wet the board down and you slide it, so it slides a little more easily. And it was a tremendous amount of bulwark, but an absolutely beautiful path. And those who visited our gardens in the spring, I think some climbed up to the top. Again, amidst boulders that were there. And this is an aerial view of the steps winding up the hill. It's
The
about
photographs just don't do it justice. It's steep. It's steep.
One of the great delights of having a garden is that you share it with friends, and it's open. Our property is open to all of our neighbors, and we often host garden groups that come in. And it's also used by the Green Spring Hounds, local fox hunting group, and they come through on a regular basis. And these are photographs of them as they prepare to begin the hunt. Neighbors are always welcome to ride through, so there are always pedestrians and folks riding horses on our property, and we maintain about 3 miles of trails. We often host garden tours and also art classes. So this is a model posing for an art class. Our younger son is a painter and does some teaching on occasion, and this is one of his art classes by the Peony Pavilion. We often look for, this is a group of, this is on a garden tour down by the stream. And if you recognize anybody in this photograph, raise your hand, please. One of of the major events that we host on the property is a Bhutanese archery tournament. The Sikkimese and the Bhutanese are sort of first cousins, and the most important national pastime is archery. And there's a large expatriate community in the United States that didn't have anywhere to shoot archery. So 18 years ago, I was in a conversation with a young Bhutanese man, and he was lamenting the fact there was no place to do archery in America. And I believe I said, I have a field. And that's how it started. This is the invitation to this year's archery event. Again, 18 years. It's another wonderful invitation designed by Norm. Typically, we have anywhere between 125 and 175 Bhutanese men, women, and children. They mostly camp on our property. We bring in bathroom trailers, shower trailers. We serve about 550 catered dinners over 2 evenings. They bring a cook, they prepare their own lunch and their own breakfast. It begins, they arrive on a Friday, they leave on a Monday morning, and they shoot all day long, even in the rain. They're very intrepid. This is not Bhutan, this is Tashiding in Maryland.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
When I did this group shot, this is the first time I attended a Bhutanese archery festival. Didn't know what to expect, and I was intimidated as hell by these guys. But once you started photographing them and working with them and everything, they were great, very friendly, but just to see them, I was intimidated.
They usually have 2 or 3 teams of 12 to 13 archers. They shoot 145 meters. They use compound bows. They're hitting a board about a foot wide, and they're amazingly accurate. Now, the Bhutanese like to have a good time. And one of the rules is you're allowed to taunt the opposition. And so the mates of the archers will cheer on their spouses and boyfriends, and they will taunt the opposition. So these young ladies are doing everything to distract this archer, and it's perfectly fine. They're all always in very good humor. They wear their national costume. The men's costume is called a go, and the women wear something called a kira. And they are deadly accurate, 145 meters.
In other words, a football field and a half.
The Sikkimese do that as well, but there aren't enough Sikkimese expats to do it in America, so it's a Bhutanese event. After one of their teammates hits the target, they dance and sing on both ends of the field. All the archers start at one end, and then after each archer shoots 2 arrows, he goes to the other end. So it's like an hourglass, constantly moving back and across the field, back and forth. But there's a lot of celebration. And we try to restrict the beer drinking in the interest of safety, though I'm not always successful. There's a very elaborate parade at the end where the best archer is carried by his teammates across the field. And there's much singing and hilarity. And also and there's a big circle dance where everybody joins in. These are photographs of the food being served, and our pool is open. The Bhutanese kids like to swim in the pool. And at night, top left, you'll see everybody around a fire singing the night before the archery tournament begins. One of the things that affects our interest in gardening is our interest in art, and in particular Japanese aesthetics. And so this work on the left is a Japanese Hirado Mizusashi, or water jar, a very fine one showing a tiger and a dragon, which represent yin and yang in that culture. And Norm did an incredible job of interpreting the photograph with a photograph of the lake. So you have the sky reflected, the water, the stone, the solid substance. And there are about 11 or 12 comparisons in the book of an art compared with something in the garden. This is a Chinese Chenglong Bodhisattva on the right, and Himalayan Buddhist prayer flags by the lake on the left. and Japanese lacquer boxes, very high art form in Japan, and some of Norm's koi friends in the lake. Now, my wife has a rather interesting connection in that her father was the last king of Sikkim in the 1970s. So when we got married, he was the reigning monarch of Sikkim, and that's my wife about a month before we got engaged. You can see why I was distracted when I arrived in India. This is the asking ceremony at the palace. That's me on the left with a mustache, trying to look a little older than I was at 23. And my wife's father on the right. And I am asking him if I can marry his daughter, and he did say yes, I'm happy to say. Sonia did warn me, though, if you misbehave as a husband in Sikkim, they cut off your hands and feet. They sew you in a wet yak skin bag, put it in the sun to dry, and compress you, and then throw you in the Rangpo River. So it's
Got your attention.
52 years later, I could still have all my, I'm happy to say. This is members of the greater royal family in about 1980, 81. My wife Sonia and our youngest son Paulden is on the right. He's now 45, to give you some idea of the age. And my older son Douglas is being held by his grandfather in the middle. Rather colorful costumes and native dress. This is at a religious ceremony at the palace. Again, that's the Queen Mother of Sikkim, the Galyum they call her. My son is next to just to her, which way am I looking? Just to her right, and his grandfather, the Chogal, or the king, sitting there watching observing the celebration.
So we're getting close to time, so I just thought I'd continue the story about when I first met Doug. And after the party, whatever, the wake, whatever you want to call it, kind of was tapering down. There was about 3 or 4 people left. And Doug said, luckily I hung around, he says, come on, you want to go take a walk? And after a couple glasses of wine, I said, sure, let's go. And it was a beautiful December, a little bit cold, sunset, late in the afternoon around 4 o'clock. And I said, after we took this walk around, I said, Doug, you don't mind if I come out here and make some photographs? I'll give you the prints. He said, sure, anytime you want to come out, Norm. I thought, wow. And I always called first, and he said, you don't have to call, just come out here. And having access to the garden.
That's how he woke me up at 5:30 in the morning once or twice. I said, Norm, just come, please.
But having access to the garden, whether it was late at night or whatever, he was okay with it. And that's what you really need to do a long-term project like this.
The book represents about 100 visits from Norm over a 2.5, 3-year period.
And what a better place to sit and edit your photographs. I started out making 18 by 24s, and we finally realized that those are a little bit too big to do our editing, so we ran out of room on his George Nakashima table there, so we had to bring in some cheap card tables to be able to just organize things. But again, what a view.
Thank you.
And believe it or not, I think we did that right on time, or close
Okay,
to it.
good. And we'd be happy to take some questions. There's a microphone, I gather. If anybody has a question, we'll do our best to answer them.
Hi, everybody. I'll be passing around the microphone. It'll be on when I hand it to you, and make sure you're holding it up like this. That's how you can make sure our lovely friends on our virtual program are able to hear your questions as well. So if you just raise your hand, and I'll do my best to make sure, hopefully we can get as many questions answered as possible.
Wow.
Incredible. How did you keep track of all the goodies that you had collected? Whether it was the stones, the rocks, where this is going to go? Did you have a pattern? You must have had some plan. It's just overwhelming to all of us who are working on, room this size.
I'm a great believer in intuition, in informed intuition. We never put a pen to paper. We would often gather material. We still have material that's been sitting there for 15 years waiting for a home. And so you work from that inventory, and every now and then you're inspired to do something. So this garden developed over several decades, a step at a time. And we often get material when it becomes available and see what happens. There's no master plan.
And then you change things ever after you say, well, that didn't quite
Well,
work?
I've never moved a rock yet after it's placed. But, you know, unfortunately, things do die. It takes about 4 or 5 years for a plant really to get established before it begins to grow into its space. I like to sometimes think as gardeners, we're no different than birds that carry the seed in their manure, or the wind that blows the seed to fertile soil. You are part of the larger plan, and when you plant something, it invariably takes on its own form. We make the mistake that every gardener makes: you plant things too close together. So we often have two specimen trees or dwarf conifers that look like they're 20 feet apart when you plant them, and then 10 years later they're encroaching on one another. And if my wife and I have arguments, it's often about when I want to remove one to save both of them, and she loves her babies equally. And I know that they're both going to be half plants if I don't do something, and so that's a challenge. But we do it intuitively when the mood strikes, and we've done it steadily throughout. Every year there's something new. Every year something changes slightly. But plants take on their own life, and it's fun. So.
Shows. Amazing.
So this is for the photographer. So the house picture, you said it took 2 pictures. Okay, you took 2 pictures. How long did it actually take you to set all that up? I know it was like a longer than 2
Probably
pictures. Sounds
about-
like 5 seconds. Okay, I took 2 pictures.
4 or 5 hours to do a setup shot like that. Yeah, that's why it only took 2 pictures.
Planning is everything. Yes.
My wife Sonia, by the way, is in the back.
Yeah.
She joined us this evening, but she's back there because she just got back from Sikkim in Thailand 2 evenings ago. And she was afraid she would doze off, and she didn't want me seeing her doze off while I was talking.
Thank you for a beautiful presentation and building your garden. So this is a gardening question. When you bought that property, was it overwhelmed with invasives? You mentioned a few of them, but
Yeah.
the forest, the woods, how much reclamation did you have to do before you could start designing that
Well,
amazing
you do both of them
place?
sort of in tandem. There are areas that you can begin sooner rather than others, but it was a blank slate. It was just a field. There was very little around the lake other than a few junk trees. The multiflora rose was the worst. The entire stream valley was choked with it 30, 40, 50 feet in either direction. And the only way to remove that is by hand. And you can't do it in the summer because multiflora rose has eyes and it sees you and gets you. But in the winter, the eyes must be a little blinded when the leaves are off and you can actually get in close and chop it out. The forest, I'd say we've cleared about half of 60 acres so far. That's what we do all winter. And so it was a mammoth undertaking. Of course, there was poison ivy, there were inkberry, lots of other things that we've removed. And as you remove things, you plant other things. But when a garden, of course, changes, you plant things and you see how they grow, and then you see other things that might complement it. One of our favorite trees is a dawn redwood. We planted about 25 of them at different times. And we plant them in drifts, sort of, so they look natural. And we plant different plants at different areas of the property that tie the whole property together. And some things do well. Serbian spruces for a dozen years did beautifully on our property. Now they're almost all gone. Colorado spruces, all mostly gone or half gone. Other things do well. Oriental spruces so far, knock on wood, have done beautifully, and we've planted a lot of those. You never know. But the invasives are a big problem. And then we plant some invasives too. We have a lot of bamboo. There are 30 varieties of bamboo in Sikkim, and it makes my wife feel at home, so.
We have time for one more question from someone in the theater, and then I will wrap us up with a question from Zoom.
I was curious to know, how do you work with the companies or when you get materials like the millstones or
Mhm.
the steps from other properties? How do you acquire them?
Well, you're always on the hunt, and you have people that hunt with you and for you. In the case of some of the large granite slabs, the bridge and the curbing and the cobblestones, I saw a piece of curbing at a stone dealer. And of course, I lit up with delight as I saw it. And I asked the fellow about it, and he said, well, there's a gentleman who has a tie-in with Baltimore City, and he apparently has access to some of this material. So I contacted him, and we drove down to Druid Hill Park, which is a very famous park in Baltimore. And way down in the bowels of the park, there's an area where they dump elephant dung. And that's also the stone graveyard. And so he and I spent, weeks hauling out material. The dry stack stone walls that we purchased were from western Baltimore County, where I was raised. Local farmer knew where all the walls were along fields that had been put there, a couple hundred years ago. And we approached farmers and said, would you like to sell us your stone? They thought we were crazy. And typically then you bring a loader, you load them by hand in a loader, you put them on a truck and you move them and you dump them. And then you use them. So we're always looking for stone and material. My wife and I drove up and down the back roads of Baltimore County looking for rocks along the side of the road. And if we found a grouping that we thought we could use, we'd approach the landowner and negotiate for the rocks. And we had other fellows that were only too happy to move it for us. One rather interesting story about the two very large rocks. We live in quite a nice valley, and my wife used to run on the local roads for years. And she ran by one property and saw these two enormous rocks that she wanted. And so we approached the landowner, who was the president of a major corporation and had a beautiful house himself, historical house in the other end of the valley. And so she asked him if she could have the rocks. And he said, well, of course, if you want to move them, you can have them. In the meantime, I don't think he knew they were there. And so he went and took a look at them, and then he said to her, well, I'm not so sure I want to give those rocks away. And this is a very important man in Baltimore. And so Sonia told him, you already gave them to me, you can't take them back. so my wife is only 5 feet tall, but she's pretty tough. So now we named them after this fellow. His name was Jim Reapy. He was the president of T. Rowe Price. So we call them Reapy's Rocks when he's around. Well, thank you for your questions. That we have
all
one or two
right.
from
The final question, there's a few questions on Zoom asking about if there are ever any opportunities for the public to visit the gardens, such as the archery festival or any other
If
events.
somebody really has an interest in Bhutan, we can accommodate them if they will send us their name and address. We can't guarantee year to year that the Bhutanese will come back. They have to organize themselves. They come down mostly from Queens and New York, and they, sometimes the organizers change a little bit. We've only missed 1 year due to COVID, but I can't guarantee they'll be back. But if somebody has an interest, please contact us, and we can usually arrange to have you included. And in terms of garden tours, we're always welcome to organize garden club tours. We really can't accommodate individual visitors very easily because that's all we would do, I think. But if you really have an interest, if you belong to a garden club, we're going to host a group from the Maryland Horticultural Society in May. You could always join the Hort Society and join their tour. And if is there a Washington Horticultural Society? But if you remember a garden club, you'd be welcome to. And of course, Hillwood's always welcome to come back. So Kate, is Kate is still in the room? Kate, just see Kate, and if you can get a group together, we'd be happy to host another group perhaps the next year.
Where exactly in Maryland are you?
We're where Hunt Valley, Maryland is. We're about 15 miles north. We're 15 miles due north of Baltimore, a little bit to the west, and about 15 miles south of the Pennsylvania border.
Let's give a huge round of applause.
It's in an area that. Thank you, Norm.
Please join us in the lobby for a book signing.
Well, thank you, everybody. Started week.